Some of you may have heard that the Disney Corporation is responsible for at least one real live ghost town. Disney built the Treasure Island Resort in Baker's Bay in the Bahamas. It didn't start as a ghost town. Disney cruise ships would actually stop at the resort and leave tourists there to relax in luxury. This is a fact. Look it up. Disney blew $30 million on the place. Yes, $30 million. Then they abandoned it. Disney blamed the shallow waters, too shallow for their ships to safely operate. And there was even a blame cast on the workers, saying that since they were from the Bahamas, they were too lazy to work on a regular schedule. That's where the factual nature of the story ends. It wasn't because of the sand, and it obviously wasn't because of the foreigners are lazy. Both are convenient excuses. No, I sincerely doubt those reasons were legitimate. But why I don't buy the official story then? Because of Mowgli's place. Near the beach side of Emerald Isle in North Carolina, Disney began construction of Mowgli's Palace in the late 1990s. The concept was a jungle-themed resort with a large, you guessed it, palace in the center of the whole thing. If you are unfamiliar with the character of Mowgli, then you might better remember the story of the Jungle Book. If you haven't seen it anywhere else, you know it as the Disney cartoons from decades past. Mowgli is an abandoned child in the jungle, essentially raised by animals and simultaneously threatened or pursued by other animals. Mowgli's palace was a controversial undertaking from the start. Disney bought it up a ton of high-priced land for the project, and there was actually a scandal surrounding some of the purchases. The local government claimed eminent domain on people's homes, then turned around and sold the properties to Disney. At one point, a home that just been constructed was immediately condemned with little to no explanation. The land grabbed by the government was supposedly for some fictional highway project. Knowing full well what was going on, people started calling it Mickey Mouse Highway. Then there was a concept art. A group of staff shirts from Disney Co. had actually held a city meeting. They intended to sell everything on how lucrative this project was going to be for everyone. When they showed the concept art, this gigantic Indian palace, surrounded by jungle, staffed with men and women in loincloths and tribal gear, well, suffice to say everyone flipped their shit. We're talking about a large Indian palace, jungle and loincloths, not only in the center of a relatively wealthy area, but also somewhat a xenophobic area of the southern USA. It was a questionable mix at that point in history. One member of the crowd tried to storm the stage, but he was quickly subdued by security after he managed to break one of the presentation boards over his knee. Disney took that community and essentially broke out over its knee as well. The houses were razed, the land was cleared, there wasn't a damn thing left anyone could do or say about it. Local TV and newspapers were against the resort at the beginning, but some insane connection between Disney's media holdings and the local venues had come into play, and their opinions turned into a dime. So anyway, Treasure Island, the Bahamas. Disney sunk those millions in and then split. The same thing happened with Mowgli's palace. Construction was complete. Visitors actually stayed at the resort. The surrounding communities were flooded with traffic and the usual annoyances associated with an influx of lost and irate tourists. Then it all stopped. Disney shut it down and nobody knew what the hell to think. But they were pretty happy about it. Disney's loss was pretty hilarious and wonderful to a group of folks who didn't want this in the first place. Honestly, didn't give the place another thought since hearing it closed over a decade ago. I live maybe 4 hours from Emerald Isle, so I really only heard the rumblings and didn't experience any of it firsthand. Then I read this article from someone who had explored the Treasure Island resort and posted a whole blog about it. Some crazy shit he found there. Stuff just left behind. Things smashed, defaced, probably ruined by the disgruntled former employees who had lost their jobs. Hell, the locals from all around probably had a hand in wrecking that place. People there just felt angry about Treasure Island as folks here did about Mowgli's Palace. Plus, there were rumors that Disney had released their aquarium stock into local waters when they closed, including sharks. Who will want to take a few swings at the merchandise after that? Well, I'm getting at this blog about Treasure Island has got me thinking. Even though many years has passed since its closing, I figured it might be cool to do some urban exploration at Mowgli's Palace, take some photos, write about my experience, and probably see if there's anything I could take with me as a memento. I'm not gonna say I wasted no time in getting there, because honestly it took me over another year after I first found that Treasure Island article to get around to going up to Emerald Isle. Of course, that year I did a lot of research on that palace resort, or rather, I tried to. Naturally, no Disney site or resource made any mention of that place that had been scrubbed clean. Even odder, however, was that nobody before myself had apparently thought to blog about that place or even post a photo. None of the local TV or newspaper sites had one word about the place. Thought was what to be expected since they all had swung Disney's way. This wouldn't be out there lauding their embarrassment, you know. Recently I learned that corporations can actually ask Google, for example, to remove links from search results, basically for no good reason. Looking back, it's probably that nobody spoke of that resort, but rather their words were made inaccessible. So in the end I could barely find the place. All I had to go was an old like hell as map I received in the mall back in the 90s. It was a promotional item sent out to people who had recently been to Disney World, and I guess I had been there in the late 80s. That was recent. I didn't really intended to hang on to it. I just got it shoved in with my books and comics from my childhood. I'll only remember it months into my research, then it took into me another few weeks to locate the storage bin my parents had shoved all of it into. But I did find it. Locals were no help, as most were transplants who had moved to the beach and in recent years, or old residents who just sneered at me and made rude gestures the second I managed to say, "Where would I find Mowgli's?" The drive took me through an inordinately long corridor of overgrowth, tropical plants that have run rampant and overpopulated the area mixed with native species of flora that actually belonged there and had tried to reclaim the land. I was in awe when I reached the front gates of the resort. Tremendous monolith wooden gates whose supported the either side looked like they must been cut from giant sequoias. The gate itself has been gauged by several places and woodpeckers and eaten away at the base by burrowing insects. Hanging on the gate was a sheet of metal, some random scrap, with hand-painted letters scrawled in black. Abandoned by Disney. Clearly the handiwork of some past local or an employee who wants to make some small protest. The gates were open enough to walk through but not drive, so grabbing my digital camera and map, whose flip side showed a layout of the resort, I set off on foot. The inner grounds of the place were just as overgrown as the entryway. Palm trees stood untended and ragged among the piles of their own coconuts. Banana plants similarly stood in their own stinking bud-riddled refuse. There was this sort of clash between the order and chaos, as carefully planted rows of perennial flowers mixed with obnoxious tall weeds and shrinking black mushrooms. All of that reminded of any outdoor structures were broken, rotting wood, and various charred bits of unidentified material. What was most likely an information booth or an outdoor bar, but was now simply a pile of assorted debris chopped up by past vandalism and ravaged by weather. The most interesting thing on the grounds was a statue of Baloo, a friendly bear from the Jungle Book, which stood in the sort of the courtyard in front of the main building. He was frozen in a jovial wave towards no one, staring into empty space with a silly, toothy grin as birdshit covered the whole swaths of his fur and vines and snarled his platform. I approached the main building, the palace, only to find the outside of the building covered in graffiti where the original paint hadn't peeled and chipped away. The front doors weren't just open, they had been taken off their hinges and were stolen. Above the front doors, or the gaping maw where there had been, someone had once again painted, "Abandoned by Disney." I wish I could tell you about all the awesome stuff I saw inside the palace. Forgotten statues, abandoned cash registers, a full-fledged secret society of homeless bums. But no. The inside of the building was so stark, so bare, that I actually think people had stolen the molding off the walls. Anything was too big to steal. Counters, desks, giant fake trees. They were all resting amid this empty echo chamber that amplified my every step like a slow rat-a-tat of a machine gun. I checked the floor plan and headed to all locations that might seem in any way interesting. The kitchen was, as you imagine, an industrial food prep area with all the appliances and space. No expenses spread. Every glass surface was broken, and every door knocked off its hinges. Every metal surface kicked and dented. The entire place smelled like very old piss. The huge freezer was not remotely cold now, had a row of empty shelf space, hooks hung from the ceiling, probably hanging for cuts of meat, and as I stood inside for a moment, I noticed they were swinging. Each hook swung in a random direction, but their movements were so slow and small that it was almost impossible to see. I figured it had been caused by my footsteps, so I stopped one by swinging by clutching it in my fist, then carefully letting it go. But within seconds, it started to swing once more. The bathrooms were in much the same state as the rest of the plates. Just like that Treasure Island Resort, someone had methodically smashed each porcelain commode with coconuts and other implements. There was about a half an inch of rancid, sticking, stagnant water on the floor, so I didn't stay there very long. What's odd is that the toilets and sinks and the bidets in the ladies' room, yes, I went there, were all dripped, leaked, or just ran freely. It seemed that, to me, they should have shut off the water long ago. Long ago. Though it was like a whisper, there were plenty of rooms in the resort, but naturally I didn't have time to look through them all. The few I did peer into were similarly wrecked, and I didn't expect to find anything there. I thought there were actually a television or a radio in one room, as I really think I heard a quiet conversation coming out. Though it was like a whisper, probably my own breathing echoing in silence, or just another case of sound flowing water, playing tricks on the mind. And this is what it sounds like. I didn't believe it. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Your father told you. I know, that sounds ridiculous. I'm just telling you what I experienced, why I thought there might be something running in that room, or worse, some vagrants who had holed up there and probably would have knifed me. At the front doors of the palace again, I figured out I hadn't found anything of note and had wasted the trip up. As I looked out the door, I noticed something interesting in the courtyard that I apparently missed, something that would give me at least one thing to show for all my trouble, even it was just a photograph. There was there as a lifelike statue of a python, maybe 80 feet long, coiled up and sunning itself on the pedestal right in the center of the area. It was almost time for the sun to start settling, so the light fell on the object in the perfect way for a photograph. I approached the python and snapped a photo. Then I stood on my toes and snapped another. I moved closer again to get detail of its face. Slowly, casually, the python lifted its head, looked directly into my eyes, turned, and slithered off the pedestal, across the grass and into the trees. All 80 feet of it. Its head long disappeared into the woods before its tail even left the sunning spot. Disney had released all their exotic animals into the grounds. Right there, on my floor plan map, was the reptile house. I should have known. I read about snakes at Treasure Isle, and I should have known they done this. I was dumbfounded, just utterly stupefied. My mouth must have been hanging open for the longest time before I came back down to earth and snapped it shut. I blinked a few times and backed away from the snake, had been back towards the palace. Even though it was totally gone, I wasn't taking any chances and backed my way into the building. It took a few deep breaths and slapped my own face to get myself right in the head again after that. I looked for a place to sit down as my legs were feeling a bit jelly at this point. Of course, there was no place to sit, unless I wanted to recline in the broken glass and deadlift carpet, or haul myself onto a desk of questionably reliability. I had seen some stairs near the palace lobby and decided to go and have a seat there until I felt better. The staircase was far enough away from the front building to be relatively clean, save for startling accumulation of dust. I pulled a wedge of metal off the wall and once again painted with the "Abandoned by Disney" motto that I'll become accustomed to. I placed the wedge on the stairs and set it on it to keep at least somewhat clean. The stairway led downward below ground level. Using my camera flash as a sort of improved flashlight, I could see that the staircase ended in a metal mesh door with a padlock. A sign on the door, a real sign, read, "Mascots only, thank you." This perked up my spirits a little bit or two. 1. A mascot-only area would have definitely have some interesting stuff back in the day. 2. The padlock was in place. Nobody had gone there. No vandals, no looters, nobody. This was one place I could actually explore and perhaps find something interesting to photograph or voluntarily steal. If I had come to the palace essentially agreeing with myself that it was okay to take anything I wanted because hey, abandoned. It didn't take much time to bust the padlock. Well, actually that's wrong. It didn't take as much bust the metal plate on the wall that the padlock was hooked to. Time and decay had done most of the work for me, and I was able to bend the metal plate enough to pull the screws out of the wall. Something nobody else had apparently thought of or hadn't been able to do that at the time. The mascot's only area was startling and was very welcome change for the rest of the building I'd see. For one, every second or third fluorescent light overhead was illuminated, even though they flickered and faded randomly. Also, nothing had been stolen or broken, even if age and exposure was definitely taking on their toll. Tables had notepads and pens, they were clocks. Even punch-in clock on the wall was complete, filled out time cards. Chairs were scattered around there and here, even a small break in a room with an old static-filled television and long rotten-out food and drinks on the counters. It was like one of those post-apocalypse movies where everything is just left in a state of evacuation. As I walked the maze-like sub-basement of hallways of Mascot's only area, the sights just became more and more interesting. As I went further, tables were knocked over, papers scattered and almost melted with damp floor, and a large carpet of mold was slowly overtaking the real rotting crimson floor covering. Everything was sort of squishy. Anything wood disintegrated into mush when I applied even the least amount of force, and clothing items hanging on the hooks in one of the rooms simply fell to the moist threads if I tried to unhook them. One thing that annoyed me was that the light was becoming more sparse and unreliable as I went further into the dank, suffocating depths of the place. Eventually, I reached a black and yellow striped door with the words Character Prep 1 stenciled onto it. The door wouldn't open at first, and I figured this was probably where the costumes were kept, and I definitely wanted a photograph of that twisted, stinking mess. Try as I might, whatever angle or trick I tried, the door wouldn't budge. That is, until I gave up and started to walk away. That's when there was a popping sound, and the door creaked. It opened slowly. Inside, the room was completely dark, pitch black. I used the camera flash to look for a light switch in the wall by the door, but there was nothing. As I made my search, I was jarred out of my sense of excitement by the loud electrical buzz. Rows of light overhead suddenly flashed to life, flickering and fading in and out like the rest I had passed. It took a second for my eyes to adjust, and it seems like the light was just going to keep getting brighter and brighter until all bulbs exploded. But just when I thought it would reach the critical stage, the lights dimmed a bit and steadied. The room was exactly as I pictured it. Various Disney costumes hung on the wall, fully put together like strange cartoons, cadavers hung from invisible nooses. There was an entire rack of loincloths and native clothing on hangers towards the back. But what I found odd was, and what I wanted to photograph right away, was a Mickey Mouse costume at the center of the room. Unlike the other costume, it was lying on its back in the center of the floor like a murdered victim. The fur on the costume was rotten and shedding, creating bare patches. What was even odder, however, was the coloring of the costumes. It was like a photo of negative the actual Mickey Mouse, black where he should have been white, and white where he should have been black. His normally red overalls were light blue. The sight was off-putting enough that I actually put off photographing the thing until last. I took a picture of the costume hanging on the walls, upward angles, downward angles, side shots to an entire row of frozen, putrid cartoon faces, some with plastic eyes missing. Then I decided to stage a shot, just one for the bent-raggle character heads on the slick, grimy floor. I reached for the headpiece of Donald Duck's costume and carefully removed it so the thing wouldn't fall apart in my hands. As I looked into the face of the wide-eyed, mouldering head, and a loud clattering sound made me jump with fright. I looked down at my feet, and between my shoes was a human skull. It had fallen out of the mascot's head and shattered into pieces at my feet. Only the empty face and lowest jaw remained, staring up at me. I dropped the duck head immediately, as you expect, and moved for the door. As I stood into the hallway, I looked back to the skull on the floor. I thought I would take a picture of it, you know. I had to, for any number of reasons. That seemed my silly, but if you don't think it true, I need proof of what happened, especially if Disney was going to somehow make this go away. I had no doubt in my mind, right from the start, that even if was gross negligence, Disney was responsible for this. That is when Mickey, the photo negative, opposite Mickey in the middle floor, started to get up. First, sitting up, then climbing to its feet. The Mickey Mouse costume, or whoever was inside of it, stood there at the center of the room, its fake face starting directly at me as I mumbled, "No," over and over and over, with shaking hands, a violently thrashing heart, and legs that had once again turned to jelly. I managed to lift up the camera and aim it at the opposite creature, now quietly sizing me up. The digital camera's screen displayed only dead pixels in the shape of a thing. It was a perfect silhouette of Mickey's costume. As the camera moved in my unsteady hands, the dead pixels spread, marring the screen wherever Mickey's outline moved to. The camera died, went black, then quiet and broken. I raised my eyes once again to the Mickey Mouse costume. "Hey," it said in a hushed, perverted, but perfectly executed Mickey Mouse voice. "Wanna see my head come off?" It started to pull off its own head, working its clumsy, glove-clad fingers around its neck, with clawing, impatient movements similar to a wounded man trying to pull himself free of a predator's jaws. As it worked its digits into its neck, so much blood, so much thick, chunky yellow blood. I turned away as I heard a sickening tearing of cloth and flesh. Only cared about getting away. Above the doorway of this room, I saw the final message clawed into the metal with bone or fingernails. "Abandoned by God." I never got the pictures out of the camera. I never wrote the blog entry about it. After I ran from that place, fled for my sanity, if not my very life, I knew why Disney didn't want anyone to know about that place. They didn't want anyone like me getting in, and they didn't want anything like that getting out.